Tensions in South Caucasus had ups and downs throughout 2022. Turkiye, Russia, the European Union and the US took important steps to bring peace to the region and end the dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Armenia and anti-government protests in Iran have made the situation in South Caucasus even more fragile. Many issues aren't yet settled, but Turkey seems to be in a better position to mediate with greater presence in the region through the Middle Corridor. Let's take a look at this report.
Bölgemizde iyi komşuluk ilişkileri temelinde tam normalleşme hedefimize ulaşabileceğimize samimiyetle inanıyorum.
Herkes bilmelidir ki bölgenin artık çatışmaya, kin ve nefret üzerine inşa edilen bir geleceğe değil, hep birlikte kalkınmaya, uluslararası hukuka saygılı ve dostluk ilişkileriyle örülü bir geleceğe ihtiyacı vardır.
And to further discuss the regional implications, I'm joined by Mathew Bryza, former U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan, Eleonora Tafuro Ambrosetti, who is a research fellow at the Institute for International Political Studies in Milan, and Theodore Karasik, fellow at the Jamestown Foundation in Washington, D.C. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. Ladies first. Eleonora, how has Azerbaijan's Nagorno-Karabakh victory in 2020 and its latest border tensions with Armenia has been changing the power balances in the region?
Well, the 2020 war has definitely showed that Azerbaijan has been able to recover part of its territories, and that Russia was, at least that what we thought at the time, was still the main peacemaker in the region. Of course, there was also a very strong role of Turkey, Azerbaijan's ally, which also enabled Azerbaijan's victory. But in the end, it was Russia who established peace and established especially a force on the ground in the occupied territories. Hence, these 2020 victory of Azerbaijan seemed to carry a risk as well for Baku, a risk of increasing Russian presence. Nowadays, we see the situation is changing, and this is also due to the war in Ukraine, which is keeping Russia busy.
So, Theodore, what kind of a region we are looking at right now? I mean, in terms of stability, I mean, how tense is the situation?
I think the situation is fairly tense simply because you have so many different parties arguing over territory, transit lines, and the future of the political alignment of the region itself. Caucasus are always overtaken by empires, if you will, throughout history, and we're just seeing another episode of this. And in particular, in the modern day, we're seeing the U.S. being more proactive in the Caucasus in an attempt to try to get a peace arrangement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also the wider aspect of getting Russia out of the Caucasus, which for U.S. foreign policymakers is a challenge. But because of what's happening in Ukraine, Russia is slightly distracted on this issue, and there's an opportunity here to move forward. I also think that it's important to keep in mind what Iran is doing, because they're the southern neighbor of the Caucasus. They have a lot to say, particularly with Armenia, but they also are challenging Azerbaijan on a number of different fronts. So there is movement in terms of diplomacy that began with Secretary of State Blinken a few months ago. There's a new advisor coming in that will help Blinken soon. And hopefully there'll be some good results coming from U.S. foreign policy push. But again, you have these multiple actors that are challenging that.
Yeah, we've seen Blinken, he had tried to fix the negative aftermath of former House Speaker Pelosi's visit. But speaking of U.S. foreign policy, Mathew, both the European Union and U.S. have lately shown greater interest in the region, as Theodore mentioned. What do you make of the U.S. efforts to become more involved in the South Caucasus? What's at stake for Washington now?
Well, I think it's great. And as you know, I wasn't just the former U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan, but I was the U.S. mediator of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, or the U.S. co-chair of the OSCE Minsk group. And that organization it's no longer really functioning because France really chose sides in the conflict at the end of the war, chose Armenia's side. Russia cannot be seen possibly as a peacemaker since it's invading and occupying and doing terrible things to Ukraine. But the United States is always out there as such, the most powerful country in the world. And I think throughout all these years since the first Karabakh War, we're playing a stabilizing role together then with France and Russia. So, if the United States is not present at all diplomatically, that does leave a vacuum. Now, that vacuum was filled, the one that was left by the U.S. and France, beginning in July of 2020, when there were clashes on the Azerbaijan-Armenia border. That vacuum was filled by Russia and Turkey. I think it's great if the U.S. is coming back in and recognizes the important role of Turkey, not only in terms of the role it played with Azerbaijan from Turkey's perspective during the war, but now with its own peacekeeping force on the ground, much smaller than the Russian one, but a NATO presence nonetheless that can keep an eye on the Russians.
So, Eleonora, how have the normalization efforts between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkiye played out? Also, Turkiye, Armenia have played out so far. I mean, why have sides failed to reach a tangible outcome so far?
Well, I think the main driver is trade and the economy, because Armenia is one of the poorest countries in the region. And of course, the fact that its border was closed both on the Turkish and on the Azerbaijani side meant that the country is pretty isolated. And of course, it has a great interest in resuming trade ties with Ankara, especially. I think the normalization, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have a strong role in keeping peace on the ground. But one thing that shows us is the increasing role of the EU. Brussels is really stepping up its efforts to become a crucial mediator in not only in the war between Baku and Yerevan, but also in the normalization process with Ankara. And this is not the first time that it happens, because of course we remember the previous process that didn't bring about many results. But today we seem to be witnessing a much more stronger peace process and normalization process with Ankara. So I think this is crucial in order to achieve peace with Azerbaijan as well.
So, Theodore, how has Azerbaijan's victory changed its relations with Iran? I mean, why have relations strained between the two countries after Baku's victory, of course?
I think this all goes to the point of Azerbaijan's victory and being supported by Turkey in this victory over Armenia, and to capture more lands that historically belonged to Azerbaijan. But at the same time, with Azerbaijan's growing weight within and around the Caspian region, as well as output of energy towards Europe, it has become a very strong state. And for Iran as a neighbor, and because of the overlaps of ethnic groups and so on, this has brought some issues to a head in terms of the way that Iran is looking at Azerbaijan's new power with Turkey backing it. And really, what does that mean for the Islamic Republic of Iran when it has these ties with Armenia?
Yes.
So it's not a new question. It's an old question. We're just in a new phase of it. But the point here is that Iran's internal situation is changing rapidly, and that's going to have an impact on ultimately what Tehran decides to do with Baku.
So do you believe that, I mean, Iran is diverting attention away from nationwide protests by straining ties with Baku?
No. They're occurring at the same time. But the point is that what you're having is that disruptions within Iranian society. Yes. There are parties that are looking at how neighboring countries are helping to undermine Iran in that way. So there tends to be a back and forth on this issue that is leading analysts to look very seriously at what Tehran is actually planning to do in the Caucasus vis-a-vis Baku.
So, Mathew, following the latest border tensions, Iran has said Armenia's security is its own security. Why did it make such a statement? And would the reopening of new trade routes pose a threat to both Armenia and Iran's territorial integrity?
Well, yeah, you're right, Aisha. Iran has said these things. And just in the last few days, there have been Iranian children that were brought to the border of Azerbaijan dressed as soldiers, making military threats toward Azerbaijan. And so this is, there's been ongoing serious tension. And in the 30 years during which the Karabakh conflict was unsettled, I don't think Iran ever made a statement about the territorial integrity, let's say, of Azerbaijan. But it is saying that about Armenia's territorial integrity now, and also, as you just said, making comments about Armenia's security overall. Iran is spoiling for some sort of a conflict with Azerbaijan. Would open new trade routes jeopardize economically Iran or Armenia? No. I mean, the so-called Zangezur corridor that Azerbaijan is promoting and that was agreed to preliminarily in the November 10th ceasefire statement in 2020 focuses on helping Armenia integrate regionally as well as Azerbaijan, and bringing them together economically, as our Italian friend was saying, to provide Armenia trade opportunities that can help the economy grow. Iran can also be part of it. But I think there are other geostrategic calculations, as my colleague and friend Ted made the point. A stronger Turkey with Azerbaijan is seen as a threat to Tehran, but also the northern Iranian population that's overwhelmingly ethnic Azerbaijani is something I think that really concerns Tehran. It's almost 25% of Iran's population is ethnic Azerbaijani, and I think Iran's sending signals to that population: don't create instability at this moment of high tension in Iran.
But some also argue that Armenia may be forced to agree on an east-west Azeri corridor through its southernmost province of Syunik, if I'm not mistaken, which would block Iran's free movement northwards. So, Eleonora, is Iran really worried about losing ground to Azerbaijan and Turkiye? And is that why it's increasingly supporting Armenia?
Well, this is difficult to say. I mean, there are many reasons why Tehran might be behaving in this manner at the moment. I think the domestic turmoil also plays a role, and as was mentioned just a few minutes ago, the fact that there is such an important Azerbaijani minority is a strong factor guiding Tehran's foreign policy towards Baku. But I think there is also the objective of strengthening the relationship with Armenia, with a neighbor, at a moment when Iran is not really surrounded by friends, and it's increasingly looking for allies in the region.
So, Theodore, Russia's attack on Ukraine has also exposed the vulnerability of the northern trade corridor and brought the middle one to the fore. And Turkiye says that the middle corridor will see a six-fold increase year on year. So what would that mean for the global economy, and what kind of a trade potential we're talking about here?
Yeah, we're talking about a complete rewiring of logistic routes throughout the region, throughout Eurasia, that are running east-west. This development radicalizes, if you will, logistics and trade, and bypasses Russia, which is being put into a box now and will last in that box probably for several decades. The point here is that the line increases the volume of throughput for goods, particularly, of course, energy, but there are other goods and services that are traveling along train routes that are being developed. And this all ties in actually further east, all the way to China. So this middle corridor is very, very impressive, and it literally cuts the landmass in half. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that Russia and Iran are working on their own corridor called the North-South corridor, but that is facing a lot of pressure from the West, particularly tension on Turkmenistan, which is the major nexus for that north-south route. They've moved it instead into the Caspian, which raises all kinds of legal issues regarding whether the Caspian is a sea or a lake. But again, you have this development of logistics that were not possible just even a few years ago. So the Russian invasion of Ukraine has opened up all kinds of new opportunities for the states of Caucasus, as well as for Central Asia and moving eastward towards China, and vice versa.
Okay, so Mathew, what kind of a role does Turkey play in spearheading such initiatives? I mean, what does a deepened connection between Turkey, Azerbaijan, and regional countries, especially Kazakhstan, which the European Union attaches great importance lately to, mean for the global supply chains?
Potentially, it's gigantic meaning. If Turkey decides that it wants to be, for example, on natural gas, an actual hub, a trading hub, a place where multiple directions of gas supplies meet and where trade and transportation can happen according to market rules, then Turkey is going to be the gateway for the energy into Europe, but also all the different types of cargo that Ted has just described. The problem right now, though, with the middle corridor is that it's deeply bottlenecked. When so many companies and countries decided they needed routes other than via Russia, that overwhelmed the capacity of the middle corridor. So now there's a lot of looking at north-south routes as well, including across from Central Asia, Afghanistan, and to Pakistan and the Arabian Sea. But Turkiye's role can be huge also through the organization of Turkic states. You know, back in the early 90s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a flood of Turkish business people into Central Asia. And they often didn't seem to have the Central Asian states' best interests at heart. The Turkish business people were seen as being aggressive and opportunistic. That's different. And with the overlay of today and the overlay of the organization of Turkic states, we see the Turkish government and President Erdogan looking for a way to bring all of these countries from the center of Asia toward Europe via Turkey in a way that takes advantage of not only mutual economic interests, but cultural interests, historical interests, and a wide range of economic interests. So Turkey can be that integrator of East and West, but provided it wants to make sure that private companies are involved in the trade and in the transportation, and that these new routes aren't dominated by inefficient state bureaucracies.
So, Eleonora, what would a strengthened Eurasian connectivity mean for the Russian, Chinese, and Iranian influence in the region? And how are these regional countries balancing their relations between the West, China, and Russia?
Well, of course, there are different players active in the region. You mentioned the very important ones, Russia, China, and Iran. And they're very active also with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the SCO. And Iran recently joined the organization. This is a security organization, yes, but it's also a forum for economic discussions that members have at the IS level. So I think there is a strong tradition of multivectoral foreign policy in the Central Asian states, above all. This tradition will continue. I don't think Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan will interrupt ties with Russia because of the war in Ukraine. Of course, ties were, let's say, were severed, but I think it's not feasible to just stop every type of economic and political relationship with Russia. Russia will continue being an important player in the region, but of course, the West is also showing more interest. Let's say that we have the new, which is not that new anymore, EU Central Asia strategy. So we have like a more active role by Brussels, trying to also push its connectivity plans. We have the US sort of having a coming back. So I think these states will take advantage of this increasing presence by external actors to balance out their foreign policy opportunities.
So, Theodore, do you expect any breakthroughs this year? Is lasting peace still a possibility? What do you think?
Well, it's a great question. I think we're going to have to wait and see really how the rest of the first 3 months of this year really are key in terms of the diplomatic efforts. But there's also other events that are coming up too that we have to keep in mind, particularly these logistic lines that are being developed from Central Asia down into Pakistan, as Matt mentioned. The development of this and the political meetings that are associated with it are going to show further tensions, I think. And I still think that we have another round of violence to go before there's actually any talk. Also, this point about France not being involved is really important. And the further that France is pulled out of this process may add some more tensions, because Paris, of course, wants to be involved in all of this. So I think that there's going to be a period of time here where we're just not really going to know which way this is really going to go. But the bottom line is that all the logistic tracks are on their way, and there are bottlenecks, but these are going to be worked out.
All right, Theodore, Mathew, and Eleonora, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.